So Ben, what are your reflections on this climate week so far?
Well, so far so good, and thanks for having me. It's good to be here. It's good to be in New York City. So my sample size is small.
Mhm.
This is my first time ever being at Climate Week, even though I've worked on climate and climate change for many years in the federal government, and I know we'll talk about my role there in a minute. And yesterday was only my first full day, but I have to say I'm really encouraged by what I see and what I hear so far. I do really like the vibe of what I'm seeing and hearing. And for me, coming here, I see all these non-federal actors at these meetings, cities, professional societies, academics, private industry, foundations, and from where I'm coming from, they all have a lot of latitude to move forward, be creative on climate actions for adaptation and mitigation, um, regardless of what the stance is of the federal government for climate policy. So for me, it's really encouraging, and I also hear a lot of kind of can do spirit.
Some
Uh,
optimism.
yeah,
Mhm.
despite what some of the politics are at the moment.
Yes, there's a lot of stakeholders, to use that word, involved in this climate fight. And I think if you're just being in one world, the federal government world, then you only see that part of it. But actually, once you come out into the broader space, you see there's lots of folks who are energized and determined as well. I think there's a lot of determination to kind of carry on regardless of what federal policy is. Is that your impression as well?
Yeah, I'm again, I'm very encouraged by what I see, and I hear people stating the urgency
Mm,
of of um, of the problem, and to hear that from private industry people and municipal governments and foundations, it's that it's good for it's good for people to know
mm.
that there are a lot of actors out there who are in positions of influence, to keep things moving
Good for
forward.
morale then
Yeah,
as well.
absolutely.
So even though you've got a small sample size, can you speak to any of the key trends or concerns you're hearing from the folks you've met so far, or maybe the events you're going to? What are the kind of unifying themes there?
Um, well, I don't know about unifying themes,
Hmm.
just because I haven't spent a ton of time here, but a few things stand out and notes for me to kind of take back home as takeaways. One, not surprisingly, in a number of sessions, I've been hearing AI
Hmm.
raised a lot, not only as a tool for good to accelerate efficiencies and to help scale up and accelerate mitigation actions and adaptation actions, but also on the flip side, as a potential contributor to climate change
Mm.
if its large and growing energy demands are not met by renewables. So next year and the following years we'll see
Hmm.
where the AI discussion is and how it's coming into play in the adaptation space. I'm honing in on a lot of adaptation and resilience and
Good
local
to hear it.
activities here. One of my takeaways, you won't be surprised to hear, is that now that I'm outside of the federal government and venturing into this space, one of my takeaways is that I need to get smarter on the potential role of municipal bonds in financing projects and local adaptation actions. That's not an area I've had much exposure to or experience with from my world, but a lot of people were talking that up as a great uh, it's a great lever and source of potential funding to scale up adaptation actions.
It's actually a fascinating market because, on the one hand, it's kind of seen as slow, boring, safe. But on the other hand, it's kind of like a Wild West, almost crypto-like in the lack of robust disclosure and the fact that there's so many different instruments issued by so many different entities. So there's this weird but there's this weird blend of like, yeah, old and new in the municipal bond market. And there's a realization that, yes, we need to make sure there is some understanding of the climate risks these issuers are running.
Yeah, and it seems like a really nice mechanism that
Mm.
brings together local governments, subnational governments, and investors. So anyway, it's a world I definitely want to explore more. That's my takeaway. The other thing, um, again, what's encouraging, what I'm not hearing so far in the sessions I've been to, I'm not hearing much bemoaning about the state of climate policy at the federal level. It seems to be taken as a given for now, and it's not, from what I see, it's not distracting people from having the discussion about moving forward. So that's encouraging to see.
Yes, climate folks are either very bloody minded or very determined or very exuberantly optimistic. I think it's
Yeah,
one of those three, or maybe a combination of all three.
yeah, for sure.
Okay, I want to roll the clock back then and talk about your career in federal government, a
Yes.
long career in federal government, and culminating with you being the director of adaptation at the Environmental Protection Agency. But I also understand in your time there, you had a big role in the 2009 Endangerment Finding, which is currently under assault by the federal government. So I was wondering if you could talk about your federal career and a little bit about the Endangerment Finding.
Yeah, sure. So I served in federal government for over 27 years. I recently left just this past July from EPA. For the lion's share of that time, I worked on climate and climate change issues from different angles. I started my federal career at EPA. Actually, my very first job was helping to implement the Montreal Protocol to protect the stratospheric ozone layer. Remember
Yeah,
that?
very early days. I think I was still in school.
By the way, a lot of climate people kind of went to the school of the Montreal Protocol because that is such a successful model. So it was a good place to start. I then at EPA I got into greenhouse gas emission mitigation analysis and carbon sequestration analysis, mainly in agriculture and forestry. I then did work on climate change impact analyses across different sectors, focused mostly on the U.S. Within those analyses, you had to take into account the degree to which adaptation was or was not being assumed for different impact scenarios. Yes, I was one of the authors of the original 2009 greenhouse gas endangerment finding under the Clean Air Act, which opened the door to regulate greenhouse gas emissions for the first time ever under the Clean Air Act, initially from transportation and then in the power sector. Also at EPA, I got involved in Arctic work through the Arctic Council. I then did what's called a detail at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, where one of my roles was helping to stand up and lead the fourth National Climate Assessment. That's a congressionally mandated product. The National Climate Assessment, of course, has a lot of information in there on adaptation, not just the state of play from a national perspective, but what are individual adaptation measures and strategies for different sectors, different regions of the country. I then went to NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. There I was the deputy director of the Climate Program Office in the research arm. That office runs a number of competitive grant programs, was the home of the climate.gov website, but it also supports regionally based, but also topically focused, hazard focused information systems that do help inform adaptation and resilience actions, for example, on extreme heat and drought. So then I returned to EPA. My last job in the federal government was a return to EPA, where I became the first ever director of a newly created office called the Office of Climate Adaptation and Sustainability. And the charge of that office was to lead and coordinate adaptation and resilience activities across the entire agency. So across all the programs, um, grant programs, and regional offices. And the idea being that, basically climate change disrupts, it thwarts EPA's bread and butter mission of providing for clean air, clean water, and cleaning up hazardous chemicals and hazardous waste sites. And there was no central office within EPA to provide kind of consistent guidance for how different parts of EPA should be taking into account a changing climate into um, their programs and their ways of doing business.
So you left the federal government just earlier this summer, correct?
Yes, just a couple months ago.
And my understanding is that there is an effort to kind of scrub a lot of the climate work from the EPA, from other federal agencies. We've heard about NOAA being cut back and a lot of that climate data and expertise being removed from the federal government. And that's a real shame from a kind of public good perspective. But what I've been finding is that lots of professionals like you have come from the federal government and are now setting up your own enterprises, joining cool organizations, going solo to kind of continue that adaptation work in the private sector, with municipalities, with state governments. So can you tell us about your next move now with Operation Future?
Yeah, well, thanks. Yeah, it's true. A lot of yes, a lot of people like me who were working on climate, left the government. A lot of my cohorts who started at EPA working on climate when I did also left the agency. So yes, a lot of expertise and institutional knowledge recently walked out the door. Um, I I decided to start my own venture. I just announced it
Hmm.
basically before coming up here to New York. I'm based in Washington, D.C. It's called Operation Future. It's my own personal LLC for advisory
It's a good name.
and consult. Thank you, and consulting services. So, given my years of working on climate change in the federal government from different angles, I think I do have a lot to offer the outside world on the climate change issue, but I recognize I do need to focus.
Hmm.
The climate change is a broad, sprawling
Hmm.
issue, as you know. I am planning on focusing this initially on climate resilience and adaptation, and I'm very keen on assisting uh, states, cities, professional societies, private industry, maybe other large consulting firms, and even tribes and
Mm.
indigenous peoples. Assisting all of these actors um, at a strategic level, but also um, at a kind of assessment analytic level on their adaptation and resilience strategies and actions. So I'm very interested in finding ways of kind of weaving in consideration of climate hazards and risks over the longer term, mainstreaming this into their operations, ways of doing business, into training
Mm.
in curricula. So another just ideas about working with universities. To tackle this problem, we don't just need climate scientists. We need people in civil engineering and public health and resource conservation and architecture who are literate in changing climate and who are comfortable working with climate tools. And it's very early days, so for now I'm relying on my existing network of colleagues and friends, to let them know, hey, I started this. Here's what I'm thinking initially. Here's what I think I have to offer. And so far, even even yesterday, day one here at New York Climate Week, I made some really nice contacts,
Wonderful.
which are already leading to some
Yes. That's
interesting
what I hear.
conversations. And I recognize it'll certainly evolve over time. This is a new world
Mm.
for me. I've been in the federal government for many years, so I have a lot to learn. I'm approaching this, with some humility as well, but I'm also, excited. It's a new chapter, and as across the board, adaptation actions, resilience actions, although moving in the right direction, is still, very insufficient. And
Leaks
so
behind the mitigation discussion, I feel, still, many sectors.
I
Mm.
think so, and probably less well organized. And so there's a lot to do. So I'm hopeful I can continue to contribute.
One thing I'm interested in from your perspective coming out of the federal government is that you've seen how the feds do things, you see how they conduct requests for proposal, how they put together programs and implement them, and you see the kind of the good aspects of that, but probably you've got some experience of where the feds haven't done things as efficiently or as well as they could have done. So I'm wondering, now that you're independent, what kind of lessons are you taking from federal government work, and what things do you feel now free to do that you weren't able to do in federal government?
Yeah, no, it's good. Yeah, it's a good question. I do. Well, one there is a lot of just basic tools and expertise, um, kind of indispensable reference materials produced by the federal government that have given us a good baseline of knowledge that I think the private sector, non-federal entities can continue to benefit from, and I hope that the federal government can continue to provide those basic baseline services. But there's a lot of there's a lot of ways that the federal government is limited, and I think private actors have just a lot more
Mm.
latitude and creativity. In the federal government, you only do things that the law permits you to do. Um, and outside of the federal government, you can do a lot of things as long as you're not breaking any laws.
Good point.
and and so there's complementarity there, and but I really do see um, a lot of just a lot of latitude and creative space outside of the federal government. And for me, I will have to kind of get used to and reorient myself to be thinking about all of the non-federal levers
Mm.
that can be pulled, to influence actions. It's no longer setting a standard at the federal level, but there's so many mechanisms, even including guidance and best practices and peer pressure, and of course financial
Mm.
mechanisms to incentivize actions.
Excellent. You sound like you have a very exciting next chapter of your career ahead of you. And yeah, exploring these kind of new worlds of private sector activity, non-profit activity. Yeah, I think that there'll be plenty to keep you busy. And I'm glad that folks like you are staying in the climate fight after a long stint in federal government. And I look forward to seeing what you're doing down the line. For now, thanks so much for coming, Ben.
Yeah, thanks, Louie. Really appreciate the opportunity.